Hello, I'm Tony Bennett, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to properly disassemble and reassemble your M14 or M1A style rifle. So what we have here are a basic list of tools that you're going to need to disassemble your rifle. Some of these are optional, and some of these have multiple uses. So first off, we have a gunsmith's hammer here. This is going to be used to disassemble your bolt and the 30-06 casing, along with the 5/32 flat tip punch. These three tools are really nice to use to disassemble your bolt in a very easy manner. That's absolutely no fuss. The GI multi-tool, this can be used to disassemble your bolt as well as open the action, and as well as disassembling your rear sight and flipping on and off the spindle valve on your gas cylinder. Okay, as well as having the 3/8 boxed in wrench built into it that can be used to take apart your gas system, so loosening the gas plug. A 3/8 boxed in wrench is really useful for loosening the gas plug and disassembling your gas cylinder. A standard crescent wrench, a 10 or a 15-inch crescent, maybe a 12-inch as well. Those can all be used as in lieu of a gas cylinder wrench, along with a strip of rubber or a strip of leather to protect the finish on your gas cylinder. Okay, you're going to really need that to use in conjunction with the 3/8 boxed in wrench, and you'll see that later. This is absolutely optional. It's a Battle Arms Development T1 tool. If you have one of these, they are unobtainium right now because of the fact that the manufacturing costs, or not really the manufacturing costs, but the material costs have gone up quite immensely, making production runs of these very scarce. So if you have one, be one of the lucky people. They haven't discontinued the tool entirely, and if they get a good deal on steel, then they'll resume production on the tool. This is a Battle Arms Development T4 tool. It's got the gas lock front sight cut out as well as the standard gas lock cut out for it. You're going to need this to support your gas cylinder. You'll see that later as well. Just a standard set of Allen wrenches, SAE, not metric. You can also use instead a 1/16 Allen bit or a hex head bit, along with a screwdriver handle with the accessories attachment. You're also going to need a flat bladed screwdriver, one that's really flat, not really tapered, and just make sure it's got a really good solid fit. These are homemade castle nut pliers that you're going to need to take off your flash suppressor. You can buy a set of pliers, but it's really hard to find a good quality set that's not going to break on you. I made these out of vice grips. I took some measurements and ground the tips down myself, and I've removed quite a few castle nuts with it without a problem, but I've heard some people make them and they still break. So that's just one of those things you're going to have to mess around with. A crescent wrench is going to be good for holding your rear sight in place. You're going to use that along with your rubber strip to protect the finish. And always a good old block of wood is good to have to assist you in taking apart your rifle. First thing you want to do is, if you have a magazine inserted, go ahead and remove that. Press on the latch here and rock the magazine out. Now pull back on the operating rod handle and visually inspect that there's nothing in the chamber. Okay, and you can tell it's empty. Now ease it back forward. Now's the time you want to get a block of wood and invert the rifle. And what we're doing here is we're going to protect this rear sight from damage or from being stressed more than it should be. Because if the whole weight of the rifle comes down on this rear sight, you can wear out the parts prematurely. Now if you have strong fingers, you can probably just get away with grabbing the trigger guard here, and what you're going to do is just going to pull out and up. Okay. Okay. Now, if for some reason you have a really tight fitting trigger group, you can use a GI tool. Okay. Just stick it in there, and you can open up your trigger group. Now fully unlock it and pull it out. Now this is where you can run into your first roadblock. Okay, so as you can see, when we rotate this trigger guard to the unlatched position, you'll see that this portion here goes right over this roll pin. And so on some worn out trigger groups, that roll pin can be a little loose. And so while you're firing, what can happen is that roll pin can walk out and it'll block. It'll act like some kind of a stop, and it'll stop you. It'll act like a stop, and it'll stop you from rotating your trigger guard past that point. And at which point, these hooks here are not fully disengaged from the receiver yet, and it won't allow you to do that. So what you'll have to do is you're going to have to invert the rifle and somehow get a screwdriver in, maybe from here or here. Actually, you're going to have to get in from here, okay? And you're going to have to push that roll pin in back into position so that you can fully unlatch your trigger group, okay? If your rifle is a match grade rifle and it has a rear lugged receiver, some rear lugged receivers have torque screws, and that torque screw goes in right here. So when you take your trigger group out, you may have a screw here. So if you have a screw here, make sure you take that out. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to separate your action from your stock. When you reinsert it, make sure you torque it to about 50 to 55 inch-pounds. Alright, so now that we have our trigger group removed, now we're free to remove the action from the stock. Now, the easiest way to do that on just a GI stock or one that, if you've got some good muscle, what I find it's easy to just grab the ears, the rear sight windage and elevation knobs. Okay, lift the stock off the edge of the table and just smack down on the pistol grip portion, and that should separate the stock. If you've been unsuccessful in getting your action out of your stock because it's been glass bedded or for some other reason, there's another way you can get the action out of the stock without using the method I showed earlier. What you can do is turn the rifle upside down. Okay, make sure you support your rifle both in the front right here. Make sure you've got your action supported here. Make sure you have your hand over your rear sights, and you basically want to whack down on the stock on a padded surface like this, and that will separate really stubborn actions. So now at this point, now that you have the stock separated from the action, you want to go ahead and at this point this would be a really good time to disassemble the bolt with the 30-06 casing and the punch. Okay, so for that, first you want to invert your rifle. Okay. Okay, so what the goal here to do is we're going to use the operating rod spring, and we're going to use it to compress the ejector that's inside the bolt. Okay, and when we eject that spring that's inside the bolt, that'll allow us to punch out the extractor. Okay, and once the extractor comes out, the whole bolt comes apart. Okay, now it's very hard to take this apart once it's outside the rifle. You can do it, but getting it back together is really, really hard. Okay, so first order of business, you're gonna open your action and lock it back. Okay. Now for this, you're going to need a spent 30-06 case or a 270 Winchester case or any other 30-06 cased or based case. Now because this is longer than the chamber, what it's going to do is it's going to stick out and it's going to stop the bolt from going all the way in. You'll see how it works here in a minute. So you're going to put this 30-06 case in here. Go ahead and release the operating rod spring, or the operating rod. Okay. And what you're going to do is you're going to push forward. You're going to help the extractor. You're going to push forward. And you're going to help the extractor clamp over the rim of the case. Okay. So now it's clamped over the rim, and that ejector is completely compressed. We're going to flip it over, and what we're going to do is we are going to get this punch, and we're just going to drive the extractor out. Okay, and again, this is a 5/32 punch. Okay, and you're going to place it right there on the extractor, and you're just going to give it a gentle tap with a hammer. Okay, and what's going to happen is the extractor is going to fall right out the bottom. So we've gone ahead and done that, and what you can see is the firing pin has now been released. So now you're going to go ahead and push forward. Okay, as you can see, the punch is all the way through the extractor hole, and it's coming out the other side. Okay, so now you want to relieve spring tension. Okay, you want to go ahead and take your extractor out. Okay, again, so now that we have the extractor out, these two springs are neutralizing each other, being the operating rod spring and the ejector spring. Those two springs are pushing against each other, and this is their neutral point. Okay, so you can see I can kind of bounce back and forth. At this point, you go ahead and take your firing pin out. You're going to flip the receiver over. You're going to lock the bolt all the way to the rear, and what we can see there is my extractor plunger has fallen out. So at this point in time, now you can just take out the 30-06 case. Okay, you can grab your ejector and go ahead and let your bolt go all the way home. Okay, now we have a completely stripped bolt left in the rifle. And again, this is the easiest way that I've found to take your bolt apart. Now at this point, you'll notice that what I have here is a National Match modified, this is called the connector pin, because normally this connects a full auto rod from this point to this point for full auto, but since we don't have that, they didn't change the pin, but it's still, that's why it overhangs. But on mine, I shave mine for bedding reasons, so that I could have better support there. It's not really needed for most rifles, but that's just what I did. Normally, you would have a roll pin that's right here, and you could just relieve pressure on this spring, and you can just pull on that roll pin and pop it out. Okay, but in this case, there's also another access hole here on this side. So for mine, I can just shove this same 5/32 pin in there, punch in there, relieve tension on the spring, and go ahead and push my pin out, and pull it out. Now at this point, this is still under pressure. You just have to relieve pressure, angle up your operating rod guide, your operating rod spring guide. You'll angle that up and relieve pressure, and take out your operating rod spring guide, and now your operating rod spring. So what you're going to do now is you're going to pull the operating rod back to this point right here, where this handle is just under the windage knob. Okay, and at this point, the tab's going to hit this notch, and we're going to be able to pull the operating rod out. Okay, so you'll notice right there, it kind of, as I pull up, if I push down on it and move it back and forth, it goes smoothly. But if I pull up, okay, get upward pressure, you're going to feel it click. Oh, there's the dismount notch, and that's what this is called, is the dismount notch. So you're going to pull back to the dismount notch. Now, if you cannot get this operating rod out, like I can't seem to get this operating rod out. Unfortunately, I had some issues with my previous operating rod, and I had to replace this one, and this is a brand new operating rod that I just fit. So this tab is a little fat. Okay, so it fits really good in here, but it has trouble coming out, which is great, because now I can show you how to get a stubborn operating rod out of a rifle. Okay, so what we have here is just your standard screwdriver. What I've done is I've gone ahead and put some tape on the tip to protect the finish of your rifle. Now this is somebody else put this online, and it was a brilliant way to get an operating rod that you cannot normally get out, a way to get it out. So what you're going to do, obviously, you're going to line the operating rod handle up with the windage knob, okay, and you're going to put this screwdriver, and you're gonna just place it there between the operating rod handle and the receiver, okay, and you're just going to give it a gentle twisting motion. And so what you're going to do is you're going to get a plastic hammer, and you're just going to give it a firm tap. Okay, now you're free to rotate your operating rod out and place it aside. So now that you have your operating rod completely off the rifle, now you're free to go ahead and pull your bolt out. So you just want to slide your bolt out, pull it up, and it should pop right out. Now this is harder if you have the firing pin in there, but the firing pin's not in this one, so it's pretty easy. So I'm going to show you how to take the rear side assembly off. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the windage knob, and you're going to remove this split head screw here on the top. Now what you want to do is you want to get a screwdriver that has a, I don't know how to really describe this kind of tip. Somebody with better machining skills would probably do it, but you want one with that kind of a tip. You don't want one with a that's too thin or too fat. Okay, so it should fit just right into the slot there. And you're just going to go ahead and remove it. You're going to feel a couple of clunks as you take it out. And then once it's completely out, you should be able to take your elevation pinion out on the other side. Okay. That'll just pop right out. Now you should be able to completely unscrew your windage knob from the base. Okay, and it'll come out. So at this point, you should be able to pull your rear sight out, put it aside. Okay, so now you're left with just the rear sight base and the dust cover. And what I normally do is I just push up on the rear sight base, and that'll dismount the dust cover. Now you just want to capture it because it will bounce out. Okay? And then you can set this aside and set your dust cover aside. So now we're getting to the front end of the rifle. So to take this apart, what we need to do is remove this set screw here, and then remove the castle nut here. So to do that, we're going to go ahead, and this is a 1/16 hex head bit or an Allen bit, whatever you want to call it. Once you see that it's not protruding through this side of the flash suppressor, that's good. You don't have to take it all the way out, you just have to make sure it's not in the way of the castle nut as you're trying to take it apart. This is the point in time that you're going to want a good gas cylinder wrench. Okay, and this one here again, this is the model BAD T4, okay, from Battle Arms Development. It's a good tool. Sadlac makes one as well, and there might even be a couple of other companies out there that make them, but this is definitely one of the most popular. Put your gas cylinder wrench here on your gas cylinder. Okay. So you're going to go ahead and grab your castle nut pliers, and you're going to go ahead and put it in one of the slots, and you're going to go ahead and break the torque. Okay. Now, in some cases, once you break the torque, you should be able to just loosen the castle nut and be able to slide off your flash suppressor and go ahead and just keep loosening it, pulling it. Okay. This one here is a nice, good, snug fit, which is the way you want it. Alright, so once it's off, if you need a little bit of manipulation, go ahead and now comes the time that we're going to take off the gas plug. And again, you're going to continue to use your gas cylinder wrench. And this is where you're going to use either a 3/8 boxed in wrench or a GI multi-tool. The more leverage, the better. At this point, you're going to go ahead and unscrew your gas lock. Some people may need the wrench to go ahead and take the gas lock off, or you may be able to just get it with finger pressure. Okay. You can also use your gas lock wrenches. That's what it's there for. At this point, you can either take out your gas cylinder or you can take out your gas plug. It doesn't really matter. They're all going to come out anyway. And now you should be able to slide your gas cylinder off the barrel. So if your gas cylinder is really, really tight and it won't come off, and you're trying, you can't pull it off, you can use a hammer. Just gently tap and make sure you use the plastic side of the hammer, or you can just use a block of wood, and tap on that. But just be very gentle with this surface here, with any surface here or here. You don't want to put a burr on any of this, or else you're going to have problems with your gas lock. And if you ding up this area, you're going to have problems with your gas piston not moving smoothly. So we're just going to give it a gentle tap. Okay, and slide it off. And it looks like this hasn't been off for a little while, and looks like it got a little bit of corrosion there, so we'll take care of that. Let's slide off your front band. Now you can slide off your handguard. And that's it. That's as far as you have to break this down. If you want to break this down anymore, really the only thing left is the operating rod guide, your cartridge clip pin, and your bolt stop or bolt catch. All those things require a hammer and a punch, and it's really not necessary. But now we'll go ahead and go over reassembly. So the first thing we're going to do when we start from a fresh rebuild is you're going to start with your gas system. Okay, now normally you would start by putting on your shims. Shims would go right here. They go right over the barrel, and they go right on the barrel shoulder where the front band meets there. But this particular barrel and gas cylinder shim, or this particular barrel and gas cylinder combination, don't require shims because the lockup is really good without anything at all. Okay, so you'll go ahead and slide this over. Okay, get your gas cylinder, and you're gonna, there's some splines there. See if you can see those. They're right here. So those splines are gonna line up with these holes, or these grooves. Okay. Now, if it's a little bit of a tight fit, grab a plastic hammer. Okay, you want to use this end, and you can tap this on to make sure it's seated. Now, if you don't have a plastic hammer, but you still want to protect the threads, what you want to do is you want to get your gas plug and your gas lock, put them together like this, and thread them in like that. And what that'll do is that's going to protect the face of your gas cylinder. So you go ahead, now you can grab your gunsmith's hammer, and you can just give it a couple of good taps to make sure it's seated well. This way you're not risking the damage on the face of your gas cylinder. Okay, then you can take that off and continue. Now what you'll notice here is this particular gas cylinder lock. This is the gas cylinder lock. What you're going to see is there's a mark here where you can tell the gas plug has been, and then if you look on this side, you can tell that it's been on the gas cylinder face portion. So you want to make sure you put it the same way. Okay, so slide that on the end of the barrel. And you want to make sure your lockup, when it starts to snug up and doesn't want to turn anymore, you want to make sure it's roughly about what we call about the 5 to 530 mark. Okay. So what I mean by 530, you can tell about right here, this is where it stops. So as if on a clock motion, this would be about the 5 to 530 position. From this point, it should take a gas cylinder wrench or some really, really firm finger pressure. Okay. So what I've got here is my gas cylinder wrench, and we're just going to slide that on the front, and we're going to use that to finish tightening the gas lock. Okay. And that might have been a little too far. You don't want to over tighten it, obviously. So you'll know it's in alignment when it slips over past the gas lock onto the gas cylinder. So right there is in alignment. And that's a good gas cylinder lockup. So now it's time to put your gas piston in. So you'll notice there's a flat spot on your gas piston. That flat spot needs to coincide with the flat spot on the back opening of your gas cylinder. We call it the D cut. Okay, so it's got to go in just like that. So you can drop it in. Basically, what you're doing also is you're lining up the gas port. You want the gas port pointed straight up towards the barrel, because that's where the gas port is on the barrel. It goes down into the gas cylinder and operates the action. Okay, so Now if your gas piston didn't go all the way through, you can just get something, 30-06 gauge or something, and you can push it all the way through. And there you go. Okay. So now that our block is completely on, gas piston's in, you want to make sure that when you put your gas plug on, that you put some Antiseize on there. And what I use is the gray spark plug Antiseize lubricant. Well, this tube I've had for a couple of years now. That's all you need, and it's lasted me that long. So just want to get a little bit, apply it on the threads. Make sure your threads are clean too. You always want to make sure that there's not a lot of junk in there, or sand or dirt. If you need to go through with a rag and some alcohol and clean it out real good, probably be a good idea. Okay, so these threads are really fine pitch, and you don't want to damage them. So we'll go ahead and put that on. Okay. You're going to get your gas cylinder wrench. We're just going to put that on. Okay. So now that you've got your gas cylinder wrench on, you're ready to torque it down. Again, you just want to use a 3/8 boxed end wrench. Okay. And you can just use what I like to call German torque, or good and tight. Okay. And you can either just, you don't want to, obviously you don't want to go too gorilla on it, or you could use just your GI multi-tool. Okay. Whatever leverage that will give you. Now if you're going to use a torque wrench, what you want to do is make sure that your offset adapter is set at a 90-degree angle. You either want it here, okay, or you want it here, okay. If you're going to have it too far out, then you have to use the formula. But if it's this close to the socket, go ahead and use a crow's foot, it's supposed to be a 3/8 crow's foot, but you can also use a 10mm, which is what this is. This is a gas line socket, so for like brake lines and stuff like that. I found that it actually does work, but if you can find a crow's foot, they're kind of expensive. They can run you $30 to $40 if you can find them. So you want to torque this to 150 inch-pounds. Now you can go as high as 23 foot-pounds, but the minimum is 120 inch-pounds, so your range is 123 inch-pounds to 23 foot-pounds with a popular setting of 150 inch-pounds. So I would stay at about 150 inch-pounds. The only people that use the 23 foot-pounds was the United States Marine Corps Rifle Team, but some people still use that as well. I haven't found a need to go that heavy, so that's a good starting point. So at this point, you want to leave your gas cylinder wrench on, and you want to put on your flash suppressor. Okay, so what we're going to do is you're going to put the castle nut in there. Okay, and remember the bayonet lug side down, and again, this part has splines just like the gas cylinder, and you have these mating grooves here on the barrel, so that's what you want to line up. Okay, so put your castle nut in with the crown or the notches facing outward. Now we're just going to slide this over. This one seems to be a little bit of a snug fit, which is good. Okay, and again, if you're going to hammer on it, you want to make sure you use a plastic tipped hammer. Just hammer gently. At some point in time, you're going to reach the castle nut, and you're going to have to tighten it. Okay, and you want to make sure that when you do, that your set screw isn't jamming it as well. So let's give it a little tap. Okay, once you verify that your flash suppressor is fully seated, okay, it's not going to go on anymore, and you've tightened on your castle nut as far as it will go. Once you know you have a noticeable gap between these two pieces right here, then you know you're ready to go ahead and start torquing on your castle nut. So you can get your castle nut pliers and find your groove. Okay, and what you want to do is you want to line up the next notch to the hole. So we're going to go ahead and wrench on this a little bit, about right there. And what you can do is you can take this set screw out and you can look, and if you need to go a little bit farther, you can go farther. So you're going to use your 1/16 hex bit or Allen wrench, whatever it is you choose to use. And you're just going to look in this gap here, and that'll tell you if you're lined up or not. So right here, looks like that's about where it wants to stop, but it's too far out. So I need to wrench on it just a little bit more. Alright, so once you have your castle nut snugged on all the way and you have a groove lined up, go ahead and tighten that set screw all the way in. And just snug it. You don't have to torque it down real hard. Okay? And you'll see that it should be recessed all the way within that hole. So now that you have your front end all taken care of, I want to go ahead and we're going to put your bolt in. That's the first thing you're going to do. Now, if you didn't disassemble your bolt, that's fine. You go ahead and put it in now, but I did. Either way, you're going to put both of them in now. It's easier to put in a disassembled one because you don't have the firing pin tail hanging down and getting caught up in the safety bridge cutout. So you're going to slide the bolt in that way, and you're going to push it all the way back. So now you're going to turn your receiver on side. Or your action, you're going to turn your action on the side. So now you're going to slide in your operating rod into this hole here, okay? And you're going to line up the operating rod handle with the right rear sight ear, okay? And you make sure that your bolt roller is inside the notch, okay? As you can see, the bolt's going to be in this upper portion of the cam. Okay, so I'm going to slide that all in, line up your notch, and just give it a gentle push, and it should click in. And now when you slide your operating rod forward, your bolt should follow. Okay, it should be nice and smooth. There shouldn't be any binding. Now you're going to flip the action upside down. Remember, if you didn't take off your rear sight, you want to go ahead and put a block of wood under the receiver to protect the rear sight, but I don't have it in there right now, so it doesn't really matter. You're going to get your operating rod spring. I'm going to go ahead and slide that in there. You're going to get your operating rod spring guide. This is a National Match one. The original ones are just a stamped flat piece of sheet metal, which they work just fine as well. So you're going to slide that all the way forward. You're going to put your operating rod guide there in the notch. Okay. Once you have it in a certain position, it should stay there. It shouldn't pop out. Well, normally your connector is already going to be in, but like I said, mine, I took the roll pin out, and I'm going to slide that in. And you're just going to kind of wiggle this around till it pops in. And there we go. So mine's in now. So at this point, we can start to reassemble the bolt. And how we're going to do that, you're going to pull your operating rod back, okay, and you're going to engage the bolt stop and let your operating rod go. So now the bolt is locked to the rear. So what you're going to do now is we're going to slide in your ejector. And this cutout right here has to be faced to the right. Okay, so you have your ejector, and you're going to slide it in the bolt in the bottom hole there. Okay, I'm going to make sure it's oriented the right way. Okay, now at this point you're going to insert a 30-06 case into the chamber, empty. Now you're going to let the bolt go home easily. Okay, you're going to walk it home. And now we have this condition where the ejector spring and the operating rod spring are working against each other, and this is their equilibrium point. Okay, this is where they cancel each other out. At this point, you want to get your extractor spring and plunger, and you're going to put that in. So I have here a set of needle nose pliers. Okay, And we're just going to put the ejector spring and the plunger in there, and we're going to insert it into the hole in the bolt right there where the bolt roller is. So now you can see we've got that in that clear cutout. And we're just going to slide the firing pin in, and we're going to push it all the way in. Okay, so it's very important to not forget that step. Okay, so now at this point all that's left is to put the extractor in. Now what I want you to look down at, you can see the hole there. Okay. Okay. So what you're going to do now is you're going to push all the way forward on the operating rod handle, and you're going to compress that spring all the way, and you're going to expose the hole there, and you can see it. You can look straight through, and there's no obstructions. So at that point, you're just going to slide your extractor. You're just going to put it in, okay, and you're just going to snap it in, and that's it. That's how you get your bolt back together. Now, keep your hand over the action, because when you pull this operating rod back, that empty case is going to fly right out. Okay? That's a very, very powerful spring. Okay? So now our bolt's completely together, and our action is basically together as well. So minus the rear sights, that's basically your complete barreled action. At this point in time, now you can put your handguard on. Just go ahead and put it in those front slots, and you're just going to clamp, or you're just going to push down until the handguard clip engages the grooves on the side of the barrel. That's it. So now it's time to put the rear sight together. It's very, very easy. So the first thing you want to do, get your spring and your housing, put them together. You want that spring inside that groove right there on the receiver. Okay, put your housing in there and just snap down on the spring. This is also called dust cover as well. So now your rear sight base is inserted along with your spring. You're going to slide in your aperture now. Okay, now you're going to put in your windage knob. Make sure that it's lined up pretty good. So at some point in time it'll start catching the rear sight, and I like to line up my reference marks, my windage marks, and try to center it up as much as possible. Okay, so that's about center right there. Now it's time to put in your elevation pinion. Okay, now what you'll notice about this pinion is that it has a flat side. Okay, so that flat side needs to mate up with the flat side inside the rear sight ear there. You'll see a little flat spot, and it appears to be down here in this section. So when you put in this pinion, you want that cutout, this flat spot, to mate up with that spot. Okay. Okay. So if it's not going in, just pull up on your rear sight real quick, and that will the gears will line up and the pinion will go all the way through. So now at this point, you want to go ahead and tighten up that windage screw. Okay. And what you're going to notice is as it starts tightening, it's going to hit these detents or clunks. Okay, there's one. So what you're going to do is you're going to tighten it all the way. I think that's as tight as I can get it. And you're going to back it off 1 or 2 clunks, okay? Okay, there's one. So once it backs off that one, you're going to feel like a little bit of what we call like a lash, or a kind of like a slot point, and that's okay. It's going to land in there somewhere. So now what you want to do is test your windage to see if you can actually turn it. And it can with force. So obviously the tighter the better. So this way you know that under recoil things aren't going to move. Okay, and you also want to test your elevation to make sure that it will move. And you have firm clicks, and I do. Okay, so that is how you get your rear sight together. Now let's say that from the bottom, 15 clicks should give you your 200 yards, or let's just say 5 clicks. So one, 2, 3, 4, 5. So notice right here that to get a 200 yard zero, my 2 isn't exactly lined up. It needs to come back about 3 clicks, okay? And how you do that, how you adjust it, is you bottom it all the way out again, okay? What I have here is just a rubber piece of molding, okay? So what you want to do is wrap that around your rear sight, and you want to get some channel locks, hold on to that rear screw, or to that elevation screw, get your screwdriver, and you just want to break the torque on that, okay? And just, you got it nice and loose, and now you're going to just put it snug, okay? So what you're going to do now is, you know that for when it's all bottomed out and you come up 5 clicks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know that your 2 is not where it needs to be. So that means your 2 needs to come back about 2 clicks, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to bottom out the rear sight again, okay? We're going to hold the rear sight now. Actually, what you can do, because I have to go this way, we're just going to give it a couple more clicks. When I loosen that screw, I should be able to move this drum and the elevation doesn't move, okay? And if it won't move, just loosen it a little bit more, okay? Okay, so now I have 2 clicks there. Let me snug it up just a little bit. Okay, now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now my 2 is lined up with my white line, and my rear drum is calibrated. Now I can sit there and go 3, 4, 4 being 400 yards, 5 being 500 yards. Actually, that's 6. There's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. So now that you have it calibrated, okay, now you want to tighten it back up again. So you're going to get that piece of rubber or your leather, whatever it is, and you're going to get your channel locks. You're going to hold that real tight, clamp down on it real good, and try your best to tighten that screw without jumping the slot. So the tighter the better. Okay. I guarantee you that's not going anywhere. Okay. You can do one final check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And my 2. Actually, that's the starting point, because it didn't really engage on this one here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it looks like it jumped a little bit. All I have to do is loosen this rear screw and adjust it one more click, and that's how you calibrate your rear drum. So at this point, your action is completely assembled, and now all you have to do is put it in the stock and latch down on your trigger group. Okay, so right here at this front portion, we want to put this lip over. This is the front band, this is the stock ferrule, so we want the lip over the stock ferrule. Okay, so you're going to go ahead and put that in there. Now you're going to line up your receiver legs in the action and drop it in. Okay, now at this point it's just a matter of inserting your trigger group and clamping it down. So you notice in here that there are these grooves right here in only the right side leg. Okay, the right side receiver leg is the only one that has this groove or this cutout in the leg, and what that allows the trigger group to do is that groove, or that notch there, will fit into that groove. And you just line the two up, search for it, okay? Now you're in. And now you can clamp down on your receiver, okay? Now, about right here is where you should start feeling pressure, okay? Right about where the trigger guard starts to pass over the trigger itself, okay? That's about where you want it to be. Now, if it doesn't get pressure until you about down here, then your rifle might not shoot that well. It means there's not much clamping pressure going on here, and there's not going to be much draw pressure up front. So now that we're all in here and everything's lined up, you're just going to give it a nice good push, and that's it. Your rifle is now put back together. Okay, so now that you have your rifle completely together, you want to do a full function check. Okay, obviously when you pull the operating rod back, okay, should have any binding. However, the bolt will ride over the hammer, and you're going to feel some catching there. Don't worry about it. So just make sure you have a nice smooth operation. Okay, put the safety on. Okay, safety on, pull the trigger, nothing should happen. Safety off, pull the trigger, the hammer should fall. You'll see it hit the firing pin here. Okay, now what you're going to do is you're going to hold the trigger down, and you're going to cycle that action. Okay, now when you let off the trigger, you also notice the hammer should not follow it home. So you're going to let off the trigger, you should feel a clunk. Okay, that's the trigger resetting. Pull the trigger again, and the hammer should fall again. That concludes the disassembly and reassembly of your M14 rifle and other clones.